Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our final session of the day, Securing Data Sharing in Government. My name is Emily Jarvis, and I'm the Senior Manager for Events here at GovLoop, and I'll be moderating this final session, so thank you so much for joining me. And a very special thanks to our partners at Zetaset and Red Hat for helping us put on this training today. So let's jump right to it, shall we? DevOps practices in government, well, they're just exploding. And one of the reasons for that growth is because Red Hat OpenShift is enabling that adoption. Containers are an essential component of DevOps, and the OpenShift Kubernetes container platform is integral for orchestration within these environments. Data security is now challenged to keep pace with the size and scope of container usage. The migration from legacy in-house deployments to hybrid cloud installations has created new attack surfaces. But the good news is that today you're going to hear about the ongoing shift with an expert from Zetaset. But before we get to that, well, you guys know the drill by now. We have a few housekeeping items to go over. First, I want to encourage you to share your insights via Twitter using the hashtag GLTrain. We hope you don't have any technical difficulties, but if you do, look for that Ask a Question tab on your console, and Maddie from our team will help you out. You can use that same portal to submit questions to our speaker, and we want your questions, so don't be shy. Put your questions in early and often. We do have several resources available for you to download, including this slide deck. Those resources are just to the right of your screen, so make sure you check those out. Tomorrow, we will be sending out a recording of the entire virtual summit, so you can view it again or share it with your colleagues. So make sure you're taking a peek in your inbox to get that email. Finally, I do want to let you know that we will be giving out 1 CPE credit for your participation in this training. To get that credit, be sure to take all 3 polls, participate in the entire session, and fill out the post-event evaluation. And speaking of polls, the first one, well, it's headed your way right now, and we want to know, have you used Red Hat OpenShift before? I'm going to give you a few seconds to take that poll, and I want to remind you that you will be getting your CPE certificate mailed to you on December 1st. And while you are finishing taking up that poll, I'm going to introduce you to our speaker. Tim Riley is the Chief Executive Officer at Zetaset. He brings more than 25 years of successful public and private experience in the high-tech industry, filling key operational roles within product line business units and venture capital-funded companies through all stages of growth. During his time at Zetaset, the company has successfully grown its software-defined encryption portfolio to provide a comprehensive data protection solution across all physical, virtual, and cloud environments. Prior to joining the company, Tim was VP of Finance and Operations at Trapeze Networks, where he helped build the company into a leading provider of wireless equipment, which was later acquired by Juniper Networks. He clearly knows this stuff, which is great. And before I hand things over to Tim, I'm going to get the results of our poll. And when asked, have you used Red Hat OpenShift before? A large percent said no, about 87%, which is perfect, Tim, because you can tell us all about how and why for our attendees they should be using this technology. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Happy to be here today. I know normally we'd be in person, it'd be 4 o'clock, and I'd be struggling to keep everyone's attention, so I will keep it light but educational so we can get you to whatever you're doing today. Like Emily said, she said it better than me about my bio. I don't need to jump into that, so we're just going to move beyond that. Just know that as far as infrastructure goes, whether it's telco, hardware, wireless, security, I've seen a lot of it over my years. Zetaset and myself were based out in the Silicon Valley in the Bay Area. And with that comes a lot of knowledge that's learned about all these different infrastructure areas. So let's look at where this is all going to start from. There we go. So this is the Tower of London, if you're familiar with it, if you've been on vacation. This has been around for over 1,000 years, or about 1,000 years. and started back William the Conqueror. Maybe you had to do that lesson in history class in high school. But for 500 years, they protect the crown jewels and all the wealth of the English Empire. Well, guess what happens when you start to get that kind of treasure? People get interested. People want to steal it. And sure enough, they had to build more walls, and you can see the amount of wealth continue to grow and grow and grow. Well, guess what? At the end, somebody actually did get in. It was considered impenetrable, which I think a lot of people think maybe we are at that stage with encryption and data and how to protect it. And just know you can never protect anything 100%. If someone tells you they can, it's 99.9, but there is that 0.1%. So always keep that in mind. We just all endeavor to secure as best we can. So now, like I said, the new treasure is data. And you can see that it's coming in different forms, from whether it be across the social media or any kind of edge device. And we're going from 40 zettabytes, zettabyte, get that, to 175 in 5 years. That's exponential growth that we've never seen before. And you can imagine the wealth of data that's in there, whether it be in the federal space or just enterprise or anywhere for that matter, social media companies, the like, that there is going to be a temptation for an attack, data breach, and ultimately data theft. And we've seen that just in the last year in all the headlines that have come out. So what do we do with all this data? If you look at it, the digital transformation is you hear it from everyone. It is a bit of a buzzword, but there are initiatives that go with it. So let's take it seriously and understand that a lot of this data, it's being generated all the way at the edge. It's being generated by a wealth of different things, whether it's hospitals, whether it's any kind of devices that you might find in the military. It's just exponential. But we all realize that on-prem storage can only do so much. How much are you going to put in the data center when you have all this value gained from the cloud? So you need a hybrid solution. And if that's the case, you need to be able to have a hybrid solution that allows you to analyze data in real time and give you that benefit. Of course, in the military and the federal space, that is extremely important. When we look to where and how fast digital transformations are happening, I think there's some great programs. I know that the U.S. Air Force is doing some that are really pushing ahead aggressively with digital transformation. And the problem is, the quicker you go, the more you're susceptible to a breach. That is pretty common. If you're trying to add value, extract value, give your time to value for the customer, help the bottom line, and just be a pioneer, you're going to forget some things. You're going to have attack vectors that show up. And we all realize that's happening, and how do we get security embedded back in there to at least protect our treasure? And I think we've gone from the digital transformation to digital government. And that, to me, is the focus of this. It's how do we take all that data that comes from government, how do we pull it from silos, how do we extract the value, and how do we benefit the country? And that, to me, is where Red Hat is a great place. They're fitting in wonderfully. And I think you guys might have seen the announcement came out yesterday. I think 4.6 just came out of their OpenShift platform, which is FIPS, and really embraces the government needs that we have right now. And we're excited to be a part of that because we round out that whole offering. And right there, I'll take a break because I want your mind's eye to see this. When it comes to infrastructure, you have the bare metal, the servers, and the data center. Then they figured out how to make virtual machines, but still a virtual machine is only on one server. Now all of a sudden containers came around, and containers are able to just use that data or the server, and you can have hundreds of containers. And you need something to manage them and orchestrate them, and guess what that is? That's Kubernetes. But Kubernetes is tough, so here comes OpenShift and this enterprise-hardened platform. Did great, it's been adopted. It's ahead, it's cutting edge compared to some of the other distributions out there, and now we got to get it into Fed. And this new version that just came out is really the first step, I think, to really seeing even more accelerated adoption for Red Hat. So I just gave you the full session on that one. And Matt Bach was somebody who just came out and said that not too long ago, and I think this is how we transform and leverage the digital government to give value within the various agencies, military services alike. And I hope at some point you guys get a chance to at least demo and eval this in the next couple months. So I want to focus today more on the military services. There is, and I'll caveat by saying, yes, the civilian agencies, there are plenty of a wealth of different opportunities in there and value to be brought by OpenShift. But for purposes of this, let's talk about defense. And Dana Deasy over there at the DoD, she captured it as best you can. You're going to have these sensor to shoot, and there's only one way to do that with the Joint All-Domain Command Center, which gives you the ability to share data and modernize, and that's the advantage that the U.S. will have on the battlefield. What that looks like is something that I enjoyed looking at this, and I think my kid did too. If you look at the various levels of where we're getting data and how are we supposed to share that data, it's siloed. It may only be the Navy has one, the Air Force has one, Cyber Command has one, and now there's a new Space Force. How do we share all that data? And that is the important. But are you willing to trust your fellow military service with it? Yes, of course. But at the end of the day, are you still hesitant because maybe the security isn't there around the data? And I think the answer there is yes as well. You need to be able to trust. You need to be able to do something with this data, but I need to know, and I need to be able to sleep knowing that the data I gave you is protected. So therein lies the problem. The initiative of the Joint All-Domain Command Center is the future of the United States military. But to do so, we have to share data and we have to expose our own highly classified data to our fellow military service. How do we protect that? All the while leveraging the benefits of Kubernetes and OpenShift to move that data around and tap into it. There is the problem and the opportunity. So what is the best way to protect all this data? Well, the whole purpose of this discussion is encryption. Data protection. It is known consensus-wide that encryption is the best way to do it. Now, whether that's manipulating it, putting the data at rest and encrypting it, moving the key away, logging and making sure that whatever's being encrypted and decrypted is monitored, those three things encapsulate your best way to protect data. I will specifically call out one thing about number 2 there. You can't lock your door and then put the key under the mat, which is essentially locking the door to the house is encrypting, and then putting the encryption key under the doormat doesn't do you any good. You got to move it somewhere else. And we have a bunch of partners in the Fed space, key management vendors who are FIPS and work with us to manage those keys. It takes a village, and it's more than just encryption. I want to let you know that there are legs of a stool for security. One of the legs is the importance of protecting the data. The next one, in my mind, is also access controls. You need access and identity management. And then on top of it, you need some type of runtime analysis to ensure that there's no bad actors infiltrating. So between the three of them, they give you more of a comprehensive security solution. Don't forget that. We're just going to focus in our talk here about encryption in place. Great. So this one, I think, tells the story and tells the opportunity. Almost 92, let's almost call it 100 at that point, have sensitive data. And they've cranked out more and more of this and generated more as the digital transformation comes to pass in whatever initiative they have internally. Only a third are using encryption. Why the gap? You have to ask yourself, what is causing this? And we at Zetaset see all the opportunity and all the data that needs to be encrypted, and that translates into federal having risks and federal having this data share concern. And how do we get people who, in of itself, weren't encrypting? Now we have to encrypt the data share. So it's a two-part walkout. And how do we do that? The playbook we have is simple. Don't put security as an afterthought. That you're playing catch-up ball if you're doing that. And I think we are. And pretty much doesn't matter if it's Fed or enterprise aware, we are playing catch-up ball because the striving to extra value, to benefit the country, the customer, the bottom line, it's there. It'll always be there. The competitive nature to be first. And an afterthought is, all right, let's put in encryption because I think we've got some concerns here. We've got compliance we have to meet. So identifying those solutions is huge. And like I said, there's legs of the stool. If we could, I'll take a second, go back to the castle. The castle has a moat, a drawbridge, towers, a wall, guards, everything. What happens if you get inside that and then you can get to the gold? what is the last line of defense there? Well, encryption has the gold covered. So you can see that all that access control, all that monitoring is the castle walls and the guards. But once you get in, you get access to the data. We're here to encrypt the treasure. So let's talk specifically about Kubernetes and containers, because that's what we're focused on. I think I've made the point that why data needs to be encrypted, but let's talk about this. Red Hat has their annual security report that comes out, and I think they spot on saw that as we migrate from on-prem to cloud into these new hybrid environments, the opportunities for attack and theft are just growing exponentially. You need to make sure that you take, again, the overall look, which I just talked about. It's more of the legs of the stool. And for this purpose, I think we're siloed, especially in the federal government, whereby we need to figure out what systems are critical, how do we encrypt. And you can see here half of the people understand this when they talk about containers and the data in containers, which is great. That's wonderful. How do we get the other half across? Is it the same percentage when it comes to federal? I tend to think not. I tend to think they're still learning how to do that, and I think the data sharing of the JAD2 or C2 will further motivate everyone to encrypt 100% of the containers, and that's where we can help. Okay. So when you go out to the customer, you go out to the end user, and you ask them at this point, hopefully this presentation has given you the motivation to go, okay, I get it. Why aren't we encrypting? And here's what we found. And these 6 have not changed. They haven't changed for 3 years. So at the top, the most important is cryptography takes calculation, takes CPU, hits performance. So the golden ring here is how do you minimize performance impact? And that's what Zetaset we've done. And it doesn't even matter if it's us or another encryption. You have to be able to minimize that because you want it to be transparent to the end user. The developer wants to take a container with his app and develop. He doesn't want to have to worry about log in, see a delay, and know that, oh God, I got to wait for the encryption to decrypt. That's not going to work. That's not going to add the value and the agility and the speed that comes with Kubernetes and OpenShift. You want to enable, not slow down. And that needs to scale. I think you've heard me say a couple times now, the great part of OpenShift is it's hybrid. It doesn't matter if it's on-prem or in the cloud. It's seamless and it goes across. Well, if you manage data, like we can with OpenShift and Kubernetes, you need to follow it and protect it. And that's what we can do for you. And whether that's on-prem, like I said, or on the edge, you have to be able to scale. And being software is the only way to do that. You can't lift and shift a legacy solution like that. And our partners that would help us with the key managers. And like I said, again, it's one piece of the solution that is extremely important. It's the last line of defense, but you need to integrate with the other levels and security tools in the stack. You can't be standalone. You have to make an integrated solution. And I think that's the future of any type of data sharing protection. You have to have a comprehensive solution. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I think Red Hat and OpenShift and Zetaset together, they give you these value. The one I would like to focus on, yes, performance, like I said, is huge. We talked to that. It's the ease of use because one of the items that Kubernetes has as a challenge is in and of itself, it can be very complex. And the opportunity to simplify that and manage it wherever it may be and how many, for those of you who don't know about Kubernetes, you could have 1,000 containers. There's no way you can do that by yourself. You need to use some kind of container orchestration product. That's called Kubernetes. But Kubernetes is still very sophisticated, so here comes OpenShift. And that's the best and optimal way to manage all those containers. And when those containers have data, we're going to be there to protect. And we're going to do it transparently behind the scene. So if you decide to use OpenShift and you have data, you know what you want to encrypt, you just point and encrypt. That's it. And your users, your customers, your developers, they don't even know. It's encrypted and it's not encrypted and they don't know. Think about the iPhone for a second. The iPhone, up until all the issues we've had with any type of criminals who we need to get into the iPhone, no one really focused on the encryption, but it's always there. We're viewing it the same way. Just encrypt all the data. The data on your iPhone is encrypted. You get access and it presents itself. Well, same thing. We want you to feel encryption is so easy that it'll protect all the data that you see coming through, just like if an OpenShift developer needed to do something with it, okay? And I'm not going to get into the other ones over here because I think you can read. It's the focus for this, for sure, is encryption, especially in the Fed space, within the different civilian agencies and others. You got to be compliant, and this gives you that level of compliance. There's plenty of compliance needs out there. If we can make it easy enough so you check a box and you can further scale your OpenShift deployments, I think we're benefiting. So one last encryption 101. So don't let your eyes roll in the back of your head. Easiest way to think about this, I've gotten this down so I think my daughter can figure it out. Think of it as sand, okay? Think of it a beach, a bucket, and grains. The far left is a self-encrypting drive. Think of that as one key, to decrypt, encrypt, gets you to the whole beach. Or you take the other side, one key gets you to one grain of sand. Or you take what I call the Goldilocks. One key gets you to a bucket with a lot of sand in it. Which one is the balance? I think it's an eternal battle of how do I secure without impacting the business operations. And as Zeta said, we have had enough experience with customers to see that the best efficiencies are with the Goldilocks, where you're just encrypting the bucket of sand, and that's what we call full disk. And especially think about the value prop of OpenShift is speed, agility, and the best way to do that is with the full disk right in the middle, okay? Well, I think I just talked about it. That's a nice lead-in. So with OpenShift, there's various components of it, and I think however you want to benefit from the OpenShift ecosystem, along with it itself, plus some security vendors, plus some other vendors, together we're able to be a comprehensive solution for hybrid and flexibility. And I think that's the most important thing this gives to us. The infrastructure out there, you need to leverage what we have better. We need to be able to scale and give customer satisfaction quicker. And in the purpose of the military with the JADC2, you're going to see that need can only be met with a Kubernetes offering and with an OpenShift on top, okay? So the speed, agility, those are two items that both ZetaSet and OpenShift bring together. And as I said, OpenShift can work anywhere. Doesn't matter if it's at the edge, out in the battlefield, in some kind of multi-cloud environment, in the virtual, back in the data center. It touches everywhere. We follow the data. We encrypt it wherever the container, and OpenShift orchestrates that container to be. So I think when the survey said we've never used OpenShift and we came up with the majority of them, I think this is a good little slide. It tells you, hey, there's the container. There's Kubernetes managing the container, and there's OpenShift managing it all. And it's as simple as that, and the data that we're protecting can either be just in the container in a wealth of containers that is orchestrated through Kubernetes or across all things that OpenShift touches. So it's a scalable solution for encryption that marries well with what we need in the federal government right now. And to that end, this is one of the use cases we've seen with regards to the amount of civilian agencies that have millions of customers touching it with secure data that is to each individual classified, whether it be simple as their social security number or payment information, all the things that, whether it be in Fed or healthcare or financial, there's secure data there. And if you're going to be able to truly embrace the benefits of the DevOps, which Kubernetes and OpenShift give you, you got to be able to store that data and encrypt it. And this was a protection we were able to provide, and you can see the benefit, which then ultimately led to further expansion of OpenShift in this environment. So how does it all work? I think this is a great slide. It's busy, and don't let your eyes roll in the back of your head. At the top, you got OpenShift. You have OpenShift managing Kubernetes, and Kubernetes manages those containers, kind of like what we just saw on the slide ago. Now, you've probably heard of all the other container security vendors, and they're on your right, and you can see what they're focused on, and which is, like I said, there's more than one leg to the stool, and those all monitor the integrity of that environment, which is great, absolutely. Now, well, container has to touch something, doesn't it? It has to touch data. So you have two options. you have the legacy option where one key will get you into these storage volumes, or you can have Zetaset chop it up into these little buckets of sand and encrypt them. So which one gives you more access and more mitigation of potential bad actors? Of course, one key is going to get you to the beach. All these keys will get you to the buckets, and it's too slow if you go all the way to going after every grain of sand. So you can see the value. It's the Goldilocks again. And I think the combination of the two make it so it's scalable. And now this is just a quick bad actor simulation, which helps. So the bad actor got over the wall, got over all those defenses, and now he's in all the houses and all the data silos that are within it, all the data that's being shared in this discussion. So how do we get around that? We prevent it by locking each one of those silos up, encrypting, and when the bad actor gets over the wall, they have no place to knock through. They have no door to open. And that in of itself is the easiest way to protect data that might be needing to be shared on a greater basis now. This one just will keep it tight. That's what OpenShift looks like. You can see this logo anywhere. You got the OpenShift features and modules at the top, runs on RHEL. We're right there, sandwiched right there, and you then can touch whatever data, whether it's Ceph or Gluster below, and it goes in any environment. That's as simple as it is. I don't need to get into any more detail about it. I'm sure you guys have heard plenty about the OpenShift benefits. But there's your level of encryption at high performance. We can encrypt within the container volume, and it doesn't matter. It scales across all the environments. So this I wanted to talk for a second. I think it's Nick Chillian. He is running a great program at the Air Force, and he's really embraced, I think he's leading the charge on Kubernetes adoption and DevSecOps, specifically within military services. And this is just another look at what I was pointing out before. All these great tools to help extend value and bring value to all the internal users within the Fed to get those apps out. But no matter what, it has to touch data. And the data protection is the challenge. Again, in concert with those security vendors who are our partners, we're able to give a better comprehensive solution. And you can see how it all fits together. We want to add the missing piece to this great DevSecOps platform. Now this one is pretty much where it all comes together. The Department of Defense with their all-domain command center, control center, this is where all the initiatives have been pushed to. You probably read about them. We view it as there's a couple different ones that are going on, but let's talk about the three branches of the military here. Air Force, again, with Platform 1 is doing a great job, and Cloud 1 is the other one that they're pushing as well. We'll talk about that below on the right in a second. Together with the Army, they've come together with Project Convergence, which is starting that data sharing, which we're all looking to see as the benefit here. The Navy has started their own called Project Overmatch. Between them, they will bring the JADQC together, and we will have an all-domain infrastructure. It'll take years, but we have to take the steps, and I think all the branches are doing a great job starting out on that. Why do I focus on Cloud 1 on this? Because Cloud 1 is where the data protection is. Platform 1 was getting the apps together, putting it in the containers, and they will still touch data, and that's important to protect, like I just said on the last slide. But Cloud 1 is how all that data is going to be shared. And you can see where I put data protection on the right, that we have to make sure that's taken care of. As Kubernetes and OpenShift are further leveraged to move containers and move data and data sharing, we're going to have to protect that. As you can see, William Roper has already, this was in a House subcommittee that was back in March. Kubernetes is already being talked about with the Congress and the representatives, and I would have never thought Kubernetes would have made it that quickly to that level in government, but it has. So you can tell this is coming hard and fast at us, and we need to keep pace because those bad actors are going to look at Kubernetes and watching it expand and seeing that there's new attack vectors that they can go after. We need to encrypt that data and protect it. Okay, so this one's supposed to make you dizzy. So I'm going to walk you through it because this was the use case that we see coming based on some of the different initiatives I've read up on. telemetry data. Look on the far right. I didn't even want to make that slide, that piece of it any bigger. I think it's confusing enough, and you can see how much data is flying around. How do we data share? How do we help the battlefield with all the data that's being collected by the Air Force of anything that's 10,000 feet and above? How do we find out what's going on just 10 miles out in the water? How do we put that all together to help that soldier? Well, we have to data share somehow, and that's the initiative, and that's the basis of what DoD wants to do. So that's where, if you're going to pull that all together, the quickest way to do it, and it's got to be real time, is with OpenShift. We need to be able to immediately get that request, spin up a container, spin up this one volume within it, say, here's the data, push it out to the Navy and say, let's see it, let's share it. You can imagine that going thousands of times per second. How many different containers is going to be, and you have to be able to scale, which is the best part about OpenShift and the best part about Zetaset together. We're going to scale right with you. We're not going to hit a limit. You scale, they scale, we scale. At that point, the threat vector you can see is, okay, that one container, which in step 2, goes out, and you have one bad actor and gets one container, and they're going to get access to everything. How do you prevent that? You make it so each key only gets you into one bucket. And then what happens then is you've limited the amount of data that could be compromised. You further limit it because Zetaset can give you access with that key for a limited time. It could give it to you for an hour. It could give it to you for a week. If it finds out through any kind of monitoring that there has been a compromise, it will immediately delete the key or inactivate the key and suspend the data, and the ability to access that data will cease. So this is the safest way to be able to data share without having a breach and theft. You're going to have to protect that data even when it's being accessed real time, and we're able to do that as the data is being shared between military branches. And I'll round it out with the other aspects. I know VA has quite a bit of healthcare, and I wanted to make sure we touched on this because I know we focused on the data sharing within the military service, but also know this can expand more into civilian. Had this with a non-federal customer, where my PHI, which I know is just as big in the VA, will need to be protected regardless of where it goes. And in this case, we're able to do that and ensure that security and meet the HIPAA compliance. So there's a multitude of use cases specific to enterprise, specific to Fed, specific to the vertical. No matter what, the data needs to be secured, protected, and encrypted and be able to scale, and we're able to do that. So in summary, we need to be able to enable the developer to bring that value through that app that's in that container to access the data to whatever the value is. We need to be able to say the DevOps functions can create this, but we need security around it. We need DevSecOps. So DevSecOps is where we need to migrate to. That's where the Air Force has got a great initiative with DevSecOps. We are one of the pieces in the sec part of ops. It's an important one, like I said. It's your last line of defense. Ultimately, all those other protections, you need them, but the intent of the bad actor is to get to the data. So we're the last line of defense against the bad actor stealing the data. And having it encrypted won't do anything for him as long as he doesn't have the key. So with that, let's focus on the future. Let's look at the fact that the breaches will continue, but we need to protect against them. Let's give these developers faith that they can do their job without having any impact of performance, and hopefully not even no security is there, even though it's protecting them behind the scenes. This will all help anybody who's deployed OpenShift or deployed any kind of DevOps environment, and it gives them that path to transition into more DevSecOps, which is where we all need to go if we're going to embrace this new technology. Okay? That's it. I know wanted to get through this so we didn't go too long. Hopefully, Emmy, this works out.
Yeah, no, this is terrific. Well, thank you so much. If you guys haven't submitted a question yet, but you've been holding out, go ahead and throw one in there. But Tim, I've got a few questions already lined up for you. So first question, How does policy enforcement pose a challenge for government agencies in adopting data encryption? Is the next biggest hurdle after system performance and latency? Is that what goes next? How do those work together?
Great question. Latency, I put under the performance bucket, and yes, if you're going to push out policy, you have to be able to do it efficiently, quickly, and it has to be agile enough to change based on the user. So if policy is pushed out to the end, the benefit we have with the Zetaset technology is the policy can stay as an agent out there. It doesn't need to go back and forth. So thereby, when you do that, you limit any latency that may come with it. It's a one-time push to whatever the data, wherever the node is that the data is accessing, in this case within containers. They're called persistent volumes, not to get too detailed. And if you push the policy out there, it knows who's dedicated to it, and you minimize any back and forth that would be causing latency.
Gotcha. All right, I've thrown out our second poll question already, but we want to know, does your organization use containers? And while you're answering that question, a lot of what you talked about, Tim, was really exciting, and it seemed like a lot of the agencies, especially in the DoD, are really making some big transformative steps. But a lot of the folks who are on the line today are from agencies at, say, smaller state and local governments. Is this something that you see really having an impact on agencies at all sizes, or do you really need a scale in order to elicit a lot of these efficiencies?
And I think that goes right to your survey question about containers. If you look at it and say you have 100 nodes and you're just leveraging servers, yes, you could have a couple terabytes of data, could have a petabyte. And VMs, legacy-wise, have been great. But now we have containers that really can leverage your infrastructure without having to expand and invest in any more than you need to. And that doesn't matter. A container can be mining data that's maybe a terabyte or two. It can be obviously far larger with, like we just talked about, in the DoD. But in any case, there's always going to be this level of data within the state organizations, like you're getting at, that there is no lower limit or I guess limit on the other end of where containers can add value. So long-winded answer, yeah, containers can go down to a few, and they can benefit the smallest state agency out there. And I know that OpenShift scales with you based on the amount of nodes and containers and the core that you leverage. So in both cases, DevOps doesn't have to be a global military operation. It can be something as simple as a county or a city.
Gotcha. And it seems like in the results of our poll, when asked, does your organization use containers, a lot of folks, almost half, weren't quite sure, which is understandable. 22% said yes, about 19% said no, and the rest were kind of somewhere in the middle. Maybe they're dabbling in a container here and there. All right, I've got my third and final poll question headed your way right now. This one says, has your organization transformed security practices in the wake of COVID-19? Yes, no, somewhat unsure. And this poll question also sets up another great question from our audience. And so, Tim, this one was kind of security focused. They get specific into, say, hospital charting security and safety, but I think the overall kind of question here is, if you're using these technologies, what is the threat of being hacked? We know cyber criminals are out there. We know they're trying to get to this incredibly valuable data sets that agencies have. How does OpenShift and these technologies think of security and make that a central component?
Yeah, and actually I'd like to put it toward the answer with your survey question about remote.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say remote's not going away. We will get over the current pandemic, but remote has been seen to add value, and I think it's changed everyone's quality of life, and it still has the efficiencies that any enterprise wants. But, and there's been a couple studies about this, before If you're the employees that would have a data theft or a breach, it was accidental, or some of them were bad actors, but a lot of times it was accidental. Well, now there's a new variable in there. It's remote. The remote worker still has to get to the same data, still has to run the same apps. So, and how many different ways can you steal credentials? How many different ways on your edge device can you have somebody get in and take what they need? So when we look at that, there's a whole new threat vector there. Now, when we log into our house and say we're using Kubernetes or OpenShift, it's going to give us all this value as whatever application we want to spin up, it spins it up in a container, and that container will drop onto a server and do its work. And in that case, how much data does it touch? Does it touch all of it? When it lands, when that container lands and decides to start using a server and its data, it could have access to all of it. Well, the thing there is, what if you could limit that and encrypt everything and only have them see what they need to see? And that's how the two of us work together. You take the benefit of having OpenShift with all these containers, being able to help all these remote users, while still we protect the data, because remote users, it is, we're human. People are going to get breached and hacked, and their credentials are going to be taken. So how do we minimize any kind of damage? And that's what we're there for.
Gotcha. All right. And it's going to probably come as no surprise to you, Tim. The results of the poll said about 60% of agencies, 61% of agencies transformed their security practices. Added to that, another 17% made some updates in some shape or capacity, so you could almost lump those two together and really get us, to almost 83% of folks, seeing some sort of change there. That's basically in line with what you were saying, right? Those are kind of the results you expected to see?
Yes, I think there's a 72% is what I was seeing, and an increase in concerns about data theft. So yeah, this falls right in line. And not to just we have other products. I'm not going to make this another product pitch, but yeah, if any remote user or end user needs to just touch data, yeah, we have an encryption product for that. If you need to S3, if you want to protect your data in AWS, we've got a product for you there. If you need to archive it, we've got a product for you there. All those things would still be incorporated into an OpenShift environment, but you got to protect data besides just the data that's in containers, and those other products would help that. And again, you need compliance, you need data protection. So in other areas like a HIPAA, or FINRA or PCI or a NACHA, the new one that comes out, we're able to give you compliance by being able to encrypt in all those environments with our different products. So I'm really glad you asked that question.
I just love all the government acronyms that you just rolled off your tongue there. That was so perfect, and I think it's representative of just how many different organizations within government agencies are thinking about security and sort of putting security mindset front and center with all of these various mandates and laws in place in order to think about that. So, Tim, like you said at the beginning, you're in my session right now. We're between now and, say, happy hour or a quick walk here before it gets dark. But before we do go, I do want to give you a chance, Tim, because we've talked about so much on this training. And I think, coming in with the last session, our attendees have heard so much great information throughout the course of the day. So if you want our attendees to take one or two big takeaways from your session in particular, their pens are ready, what should they take away?
Technology is evolving. And for the purposes of this webinar, we were talking about the technology of Kubernetes and containers. Data will always be exposed as new technology happens, and you have to be able to protect it wherever it goes, whatever technology comes. And one of the best ways is to encrypt it. And if you do that, we all know the bad actors will be there forever. They're not going away either. And compliance will just continue to get more mandatory. And in those cases, in any other case, encryption will save your data.
I loved it. That is so nice and succinct, and I really appreciate you sharing those insights with us. Unfortunately, though, that is all the time we have for this session. I want to thank Tim. We are giving you a virtual round of applause, so I hope you can feel it all the way out there in California. And I also want to give a thanks to Zetaset and Red Hat for helping us put on this session. I do have a few quick reminders before we sign off for the day. You can find this session on demand in the conference hall in about 30 minutes. We will also be emailing you a link to the entire virtual summit tomorrow, so you'll be able to access all of the sessions again, as well as the more than 50 related resources. As always, our goal with these trainings is to provide you with the tools you need to help you do your job better. Our live sessions for the day may be over, but you can still access all the resources in the Learning Center. And as a reminder, the more resources you download, the better chance you have to earn some awesome GovLoop swag, and you definitely need that. We hope you had a wonderful experience today, and we can't wait to see you at the next virtual summit, which is happening in 2021. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next year.